Hi, Steve here, back with Cryptic Woodworks. So I'm continuing work with my new table saw sled, and what I've done is this is one half, and I've laid out the grid work of where all of my different holes are going to go. Now what I did is I brought this in, I'm maybe 3 inches from each side, so my blade's going to be here. This is the front of it, and then I came in about 1 inch from where the front will be the first set of holes, so that will give me room to put that block in that will be my auxiliary fence while still having a little space behind it so that I can get those spacers in for the adjustment. Now what I did in order to start making all of this work, to keep everything lined up, because I'm sure one of those questions is, hey, I've got to take these apart and drill the recesses. What's the best way to keep that lined up? Well, I've got the second half nearly done here underneath, and I kept one so that we can actually take a look at it. So I took a very small bit and I ran that down through each of my points, through both boards. This is sort of like my alignment hole is what I'm doing when I'm cutting that. Then I can take the top off, and you can see I've been pretty busy down here. So then I take my drill with a Forstner bit. Now I am using, let me grab one of the T-nuts here. So I'm using a 1/4 T-nut, and these are designed to work in 3/4 inch openings. So it needs a 3/4 inch recess hole cut for it, and it doesn't have to be very deep. Gosh, this is like less than 1/8 is fine. So essentially I just come in and I drill and I usually do 1 or 2 passes, check my depth. And I can sort of feel with my fingers I go around if I was a little off tilt on any side. And just tilt the drill a little bit to come back and fix that. So this takes care of that. I'll shake the dust off. Now I still have my center point down here, which is nice because I know that these T-nuts, this is a 3/8 inch opening that it needs to go down into. So I can switch from my Forstner bit over to a 3/8 inch bit. And hopefully this is all staying on camera. So once I have that 3/8 inch bit, now I'll grab a board just to help avoid tear out. And let me make sure I'm still in my frame. Yep. So now it's a real easy matter if we just center that right in this little divot hole. Run the drill down through, holding as perpendicular as you can, or perpendicular as you can. There, we're through. Get the dust off. So once we have the hole, then I just take the nut, put it in, and I also keep a bit of dowel around, and I just use this to keep me from banging straight on the nut itself. And drive it down in, and you can sort of feel with your finger if you're high anywhere, and just come back and take that end down a little bit. Really, you just want to make sure you're at or below the surface. So that's all there is to that. Obviously, you would, you drill them all at once. You probably wouldn't come do each one individually. That would take you forever. And then you can come back to the top. Now, what I did for the top is I actually used a slightly larger bit. So this is a 13/32, so it's a little over 3/8. And I find it gives me a little bit more clearance because you might not be perfect. And whenever possible, I did these on the drill press, and you can probably see the difference. I have some that are really clean. The ones in the middle I had to do by hand, and I tend to get more tear out on this plywood when I'm drilling by hand. So I haven't found the bit that solves that for me yet, but I'll probably keep trying different things. But again, I can usually get 2 or 3 rows in from each side, so it'd just be a couple that I'm going to get tear out on. Now once you do have everything set, your best thing to do is line up your boards, and you can look straight down in, and you can make sure that your holes are lined up. You could even take a little spare 1/4 bolt, and you can make sure that it passes down through and catches all the threads, because you might wind up in a case where your holes weren't quite lined up, and you might find, you know what, I've got a hole here that's maybe a little too close on this end, and you can either grab your drill, or you could grab some sandpaper on a dowel and just sort of open up that hole a little bit on that side. Don't worry if your hole's not perfectly round, the jig will still work just fine. In fact, I have a few down here I was already doing. I was fixing some points where I noticed I was a little bit off. It's not going to hurt anything. And again, even a little tear out, while I don't like the look of it, I'll sand this down afterwards, so a few bits of tear out won't actually hurt anything on here. So that's how you can get all the holes in. Now I'm just about done with my first half. I'm going to go drill this last hole, and then I can start drilling out the second half, and I'll probably do that a little later after I give my shoulder a rest, because it is a bit of an arm workout. Anyway, a little update on drilling your holes. When I came through on the second side, which is going to be my left half, I did as many of the holes as I could over on my drill press. That tends to leave much cleaner holes as you go through. About the only spots I couldn't hit was right in the center. I only have a benchtop drill press, so I don't have a real deep throat or swing on it, so I can't get super deep. But that didn't leave me with too much of a problem right here on 2. Just a little bit of tear out. And even underneath, it's fairly clean. A few little bits to scrape off. And then down on the ones where the T-nuts are going in, again, that was pretty simple too, because you can just put your Forstner bit in, set your depth stop, and just drill all these right to the same depth, and they all tend to center up quite nicely. Again, when you come through on the bottom, you have very little tear out, only a little bit to clean up. So if you have a drill press, you can work that way to get some cleaner cuts. So I'm not going to do anything with my other half. I'm just going to work with the way it is. A little tear out doesn't bother me. This is, after all, just a table saw accessory. It's not fine furniture. But when I finish up this, as you can see, I didn't put all the T-nuts in. I have more on order because I ran out. So I got to wait a few days for them to come in. But you want to do the same thing. Position your top on and just look down through each of the holes. And maybe take your test bolt and just make sure you don't have to widen holes anywhere so they fit. Alright, now that you've got most of the holes drilled on the bottom, all of the T-nuts put in place, before we do anything else, you don't want to fasten the top down on this yet, because we need to put the track assembly on that's going to go inside the miter slot. So I used this piece of UHMW, which is ultra high molecular weight plastic. It's really slippery stuff. It's the same thing you're going to find on your fences of your table saws, depending on what time you have, and other types of fence structures. So it's really slick, and they're sized to fit in most standard table saw slots, so a 3/4 inch size with very little play in it. So what I did was I set it to go between 2 sets of these, and then I made it so that I will just be trimming a little bit off the edge. So I'll run this up once I have everything fastened together, and we'll trim this little bit off, and it'll give me a nice zero clearance edge right against the table saw blade. And that's what you're looking for on something like this. So all I did was I marked out where my lines were. I marked a center line. I put my piece of track down in here, set the board on top, lined it up front and back. I had pre-drilled some holes for a couple of screws in here, and then I just came down and I drilled a little bit of a pilot hole down into the plastic drop some screws in, that holds it in place real nice. So you do want to pre-drill so that way you don't have a chance of expanding this plastic out when you go into it. But otherwise it's real simple. You shouldn't have much of a problem doing it. So you just want to do that to both halves. Obviously on the other side, you do the opposite, so we shift it so we're cutting off the other edge just a little bit up of that saw blade. And that's all there is to it to put the tracks on.